What's up, everybody? It's Lukey, and I'm going to be doing a all by myself podcast. Dakota is on assignment this week, and honestly, it is the dog days of summer. It's the end of summer. We're starting to gear up for fall, and not a lot of people want to jump on a podcast with me, so that's okay. I am totally fine. I've got a lot of good friends that enjoy being a part of this show. And, we're grinning and bearing through what we're doing currently in the sport of boxing. Topic that I wanted to start with Claressa Shields' win over Kaye Scott. She is now a women's unified middleweight title holder again. That's after holding belts at light heavyweight, which honestly, if we're being fully transparent, those felt like more of marketing tools than really her at those weight classes. Those weight classes are limited, but because she's such a phenomenal fighter, it was very interesting to see her. But the bigger story for me was the live gate, and it was also who attended it. You're seeing her pack out the State Farm Arena in Atlanta. Fighters, stars, essentially. Floyd Mayweather, Terence Crawford, Shakur Stevenson. Some of the greatest fighters of the era are treating Claressa Shields fights as major events. So I am now starting to truly wonder, is Claressa Shields the face of American boxing? Hear me out here. We have Jerome Boots Ennis, who's extremely talented, but I don't think he fully gets that moniker. Part of that is activity, right? They're both about the same in activity. Fighters don't fight enough to truly become stars. That's something that always stood out to me when I interviewed Todd Grisham about 6 years ago. Grisham talked about the fact that, you see someone like Tom Brady, he plays maybe 20 football games consecutively, and then you build a relationship or a spiritual connection to him. 2 fights a year, out of sight, out of mind, etc. And then social media posts aren't necessarily the same. I think Shields has built a bigger reach in America. I think Boots is definitely like a northeastern fighter who's the word of mouth guy. I think a lot of people think that looking at his talent, he will at one point be one of the best guys, and he's someone that can carry the sport forward. But he hasn't really had that moment just yet. I think Devin Haney is very quietly become one of the biggest stars in North America, passionate fan base, big events when he fights. He went on that tremendous run from I think it was 2021, 2022, all the way up until the Ryan Garcia fight. And then when he lost and it was later overturned to a no contest, if anything, it created more interest in what Devin Haney would do. And his buildups to the fights since that have been part philosophical. People going, oh, how's he going to look in this fight? What's this going to be? What's that going to be? And I think it's really benefited him to a certain extent. Ryan Garcia, he's quite obviously talented and he's got a large social media reach. But the question is he viewed as a traditional boxer? He now holds a title. He's won a title, etc. But he's kind of skirting the lines between influencer and boxer. We've only seen him in a couple of traditional matchups. Really, the biggest win of his career, I would say Oscar Duarte and Devin Haney. Trending in the right direction, but it would be nice if we see him more active. This year feels like a throwaway year. I could see him being labeled the boxer of the year, which I wouldn't agree with, by beating Mario Barrios. And more than likely, he's going to stop Conor Benn, who we just don't even know if he's an elite level fighter. David Benavidez is the biggest name on here that I think could truly be labeled as an American star. But, Benavidez had that great performance against Gilberto Zordo Ramirez. We're waiting for his return. I'm curious to see the anticipation and the amount of people coming out for that. And then finally, we have Vergil Ortiz, who has been out of the ring since November. He was supposed to fight Jerome Boots Ennis. Obviously, that didn't happen. So we got Mega Soto in there. Shout out my guy. That's why we stay busy to become the face of the smaller weights. That's obviously the husband of Brooke Siberian, a very good fighter who's fighting this week. I think that we're at a point where we can truly question whether Claressa Shields is the face of American boxing. And I think that you can unpack this many different ways. I think that she's one of the more interesting figures that people are following around and interested to see what she's going to do. And she's built a compelling personality that have people wanting to see where she's going. I think it's also a testament to, in 2016, women's boxing wasn't really being shown or advocated or even watched. And now 10 years later, she's arguably the face of American boxing. That being said, a lot of the compelling figures, a lot of the people that used to move the needle are gone. And I think that the other story is American fighters are not, filling the void. We're almost going through a generation where the world has moved on. It's depending on your political views, you could say maybe matches the climate of America, because it feels like the world's moved on without America. And that's what the sport of boxing has. If you look at the current heavyweight landscape, more than likely on paper and with his momentum right now, Brandon Moore is the most decorated American heavyweight currently. And a lot of people didn't really look at him highly coming out. Now, that sometimes you can be perceived wrong, et cetera, but it's still fascinating that that did occur. Then you look over at more other things, right? We look at other divisions. You have O'Shaquie Foster. He's one of the most acclaimed fighters in the division, yet he hasn't really captured that fan base just yet. If he were to get to the top, it's probably going to be more of a Terence Crawford climb, where it's going to be at the back end. Shakur Stevenson quite clearly is one of the best fighters in the world. The thing that's plagued his rise to stardom, in my opinion, is inactivity. He's coming off a big win off of Teofimo Lopez. Obviously, he signs with Zuffa. Contract negotiations are tricky. It slows down the process. It sounds like he's more than likely coming back in October. But it just feels at this point, Stevenson is someone that I think all of the hardcore boxing fans want to get behind because they see the apparent talent. But the inactivity and the stop-start nature of his career has just been tough. Boots Ennis, he's one where lately he's been fighting a lot. He's starting to rack up the achievements. His win over Xander Zayas is good. I would love to see him return selfishly in the fall. We really are looking for the next guy. We're looking for the next Terence Crawford. We're looking for the next Errol Spence. We're looking for the next Deontay Wilder. And I think that there also is a little bit of a hangover from how good we had it about 14 to 15 years ago with Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. We had it really good. We had some of the best fighters, and then we had compelling figures underneath it. And the sport was making a ton of money because of the interest those two fighters had. Kalea Warriors says, hi, how you doing in the chat? I think there was a lot of money coming in. I think one of the problems is we don't quite have those figures that move the needle the same way. So the money isn't the same. And it feels like this year in particular, the sport has really, really dried up. Say what you want about it, but that just is what it feels like, is we've hit this moment where boxing is trying to reinvent itself, but we don't know where it's going. And then I think another point too is, I always talk about the 16s. I wasn't really around the boxing industry in 2006. I watched as a casual fan, but I was living my life. In 2016, I was around. And it felt like that point was that was give or take when Floyd Mayweather had left the sport. Manny Pacquiao was having a cup of coffee, he came back and he was doing his thing, but he was in and out. It wasn't the same as it was when I was watching Pacquiao fight Ricky Hatton, and there was large enthusiasm. I think we're at the new point where fighters, Terence Crawford, some of the beloved PBC fighters, they're done. They're gone. They might have a fight here or there, but who knows? So I think that we're getting to this point where there's a reinvention, and we had a fractured nature of the sport where people were as much fans of promoters as they were of fighters. And I think we're going back to just like, let's put on fights and be that, because especially with DAZN kind of having all the boxing in the US. Okay, Mike is back. With DAZN having all the action on the boxing, and then you move over to Paramount for that. I'm seeing the comments. I'm going to respond in a second. There is a fractured nature of it, but I don't think you can be as much of like, I only watch this one promotion, which I felt like we had people that were like, I'm only going to watch PBC cards. I'm only going to watch Top Rank cards. I'm only going to watch Golden Boy cards. Now it's more you have to watch boxing because there's not as much boxing to go around. The club shows aren't as existent. things aren't happening as much. Let me read what Lionel Watson said. I don't think the turkey money is available anymore, and the managers haven't realized it yet. Well, I think everyone's realized it. I think it's more so a sheer panic of what do we do, because it's like the money isn't in the sport the same way. And let's be honest, the coverage isn't in the sport the same way. If you're a hardcore fan, you're just basically tuning into fight weeks, but the fight weeks are getting more and more diminished. I'll talk about this later, but Teofimo Lopez did a media workout and there was no live stream of it. In 2021, 2022, that was commonplace to have a live stream of a major media workout that would get 60 to 80K views. People were very excited about these things. And just small things like that, cutting corners, it seems like the enthusiasm's dying. And it feels like a lot of fans who came in the Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao era are leaving. And it feels like a lot of reporters who were really in that era are leaving. And the big story a lot of people are talking about is Zuffa's here to take over. I think more so it is a lot of fans are leaving because they're disheartened. And it seems like more and more often people can avoid watching the fights. And my guy, the mozzarella fella, is in the chat. Walk him down, Van Houten. Boxing is missing an exciting American heavyweight. September 12th, boxing will see the next great heavyweight emerge. Mozzie, I want to do something with you, man. I really think you're a compelling figure, and I'm cheering for you as much as I can as an unbiased person. I think you and JoJo from Illinois are two really good up-and-comers. Reach out to me, man. I've been trying to do something with you, but you definitely have a case, man, because, and look, for those that don't know, that's Mozzie on Zuffa Boxing heavyweight, really, really good fighter. And we need, if we're going to be honest, we need a really good American heavyweight. That moves the needle. Like, there's some really, really dumb people out there that think if they put a featherweight in a bear hug, they'd beat them. So you need boxing to sustain in America. We need a couple of guys who are just really big, who scare guys who are really stupid and hit the gym, and they're buff, right? They got show muscle, not muscle. And when they see him, they go, oh man, that guy's pretty big. I wouldn't mess with him. He could probably do something crazy. Let's see what Charlie Roberts said. Inside that head, there's a lot of ingrowing hair. Well, that's not very nice. I don't even know what the insult is there, but it sounds like an insult. Xavier says, I don't think it's a shame that Jared Anderson doesn't really box anymore. One loss causes people to think that a boxer is trash these days. What a shame. Yeah, I mean, I think with Jared Anderson, and correct me in the chat, I think the pressure of what he potentially could be got to him. I hope that he finds what he was looking for. Really interesting person, but I think that's the bubble created scenarios. And two people I look at from the bubble are Jared Anderson and Xander Zayas. They were able to fight about 5 times, and they advanced a little too quickly in their career. And once you move to a certain place, you can't move back. And I think that though in the short term it helped them establish stardom, in the long term it really made it tough. And walk him down, Van Heusen said, Jared is in it for the money, and there's nothing wrong with that. Honestly, the more I do this, the more I relate to it. Because to get to a high level in boxing, you're going to get burnout because it's just a very, very hard game. And to keep that passion is going to be very, very difficult. So if you get to a point where you can make a lot of money, more power to you, and get as much as you can, because this is a hard thing to do. And I think, and that I'm going to touch on that in a second about fighter safety, because I think people are, we're going to get to that. But Claressa Shields, I think, is making a case for being the most marquee American fighter right now. And by that, I mean cultural impact, which is like followers, subscribers, people tuning in, selling tickets, marquee people showing up to her fights. She just needs the dancing partners. And after beating Kaye Scott, I think you have the opportunity. If Mikaela Mayer wins, that's a fight. They were teammates in the Olympics. People are drawn to Mikaela. People are drawn to Claressa. That could be a really big fight. I'll hold out hope that maybe in some world there's a catchweight Alicia Baumgardner and Shields could fight, because that would be a huge fight for the Midwest. And then I think Tam Tebow, unfortunately for Tam, it's like she really could be the most interesting Claressa Shields opponent, but she won a belt in 5 fights, and she really deserves to have 3 or 4 more fights to get ready. I get that people say, okay, there's not someone that's as talented as Claressa, but experience is experience and ring time matters. And I think that the disservice for her is being a unified world champion. And this is just my belief, chat. So push back at me. I think once you become a champion, you really can't say no to anything. You have to just accept what comes with it. And that's just what being a champion is. It sucks. It's not fun. But once you become a champion, that's the life you chose. So I think she's going to prematurely have to do that fight quickly. So now we're going to keep this going, and I'm going to go fighter safety right now. But I thought that was a really, really solid performance. That was a really, really solid performance by Claressa Shields. But also, just to throw this back to good performance, not an exciting fight. Clearly the best women's boxer, more than likely outside of Katie Taylor. They're like 1A, 1B. But, you could have seen this in a highlight reel. But I think the enthusiasm for the crowd to be bought into the fight for a women's boxing match, the cultural impact that Shields is having for women's boxing is really being understated. And I think that when they make a documentary about her, it'll be really fascinating. Before I get to the undercard, I want to talk about fighter safety. Pritchard Colon sadly passed away this week. Obviously, he lost his life because of injury sustained in a boxing match. People accredit it to rabbit punches in the fight. Fighter safety is a very, very tricky issue, right? Because we all, as fans, understand that there's a burden of damage that's people take being in a fight, right? And we have to be okay with that. We're okay with it with football. We're okay with that. And sometimes you hear people absurdly see a guy get his jaw broken and go, what a coward. And it's like, oh my God. Like I think that me and Jason Langendorf for the Good Fight, goodfight12.substack.com, go there, subscribe, always talk about this, how some of the trauma a boxer endures, if it just happened to you, it would be like one of the scariest moments of your life. But then we as fight fans want them to not behave like us, right? And we're going to be very, very mean. And I think part of that too is if you're a fan of boxing, you're probably a fan of combat, and probably your most comfortable form of combat is going on the internet and using your words to be combative with someone. But this is the latest of many sad tragedies this sport has had. Lee Reeves, I'm not sure the update on him. I was in the gym with him in 2019 in Toronto, and he's having a bad way right now. Raven Chapman is another fighter who's in a bad way. I think the problem is there's a level of people love watching boxers for the service they provide, and we don't necessarily love the fighters for who they are. And once they're not entertaining us, it's easy to put them out of sight, out of mind. Because the difficult conversations around fighter safety, the difficult conversations about traumatic head injury, difficult conversations in general, they're not fun. And they make us question why we do this and whether or not we should do this. And I think I was relating this on the Thursday show. Outside the Lines was a big show. I think the host's name was Bob Lay, and they used to do these shows that were so boring to me. And the older I get, I'd be more interested in them. And they tackle these type of subject matters. And I think that the big thing with a Pritchard Colon is to hold refereeing accountable, but also to understand that there's inherent risk anytime you step in the ring, and to not just be a dick about this stuff, and to not belittle fighters, because any fight could change your life. Okay, back to the undercard. Let's go to this undercard. We're kind of zipping and zagging through, and it wasn't good. To be honest with you, it was not a good undercard. Troy Isley wins. He beats Joseph Hicks. Slight storyline for that fight. The storyline was that Hicks had beaten Troy Isley at the Olympic trials. Hicks lost to Javier Martinez in the finals. It was double elimination. But Hicks made the Olympic team because winning the Olympic trials doesn't give you an automatic spot to the USA boxing team for the Olympics. COVID-19 happens. Hicks was unable to qualify because COVID restrictions. And Isley, who was world ranked in 2019, was able to make the team based on a ranking. So there's backstory, there was animosity. And what happened was I saw two guys that were really, really tense that didn't want to lose to each other. Troy was the more talented of the two. And to me, there's two ways to go. Troy either put too much pressure on himself mentally for this fight, or there's a habit where when he feels he's in control, he starts to spar people. But we got to assess that further. Ashylynn Lozada, in her mid-30s, Puerto Rican Olympian. She's nearing the point of title contention. She won a fight, but once again, it's kind of in this Tam Tebow in a different way. Lozado is really, really close to a title shot. She had a hard fight with Melissa Odessa Parker. You see that she's really talented, but you also see she's not going to get time. It's going to be a very quick, fast go to a title, and that's tough. And then in the opener, I got to get this person's name right. Just a strange opening bout. Your new WBO women's junior lightweight champion is Bernice Ferreira. She beats Caroline Veyre, who was disqualified. And everything about the fight was weird. Veyre, I'll say Caroline because I think I say her last name wrong all the time. But Caroline has a tendency of holding way too much. She has kind of that Cuban style of amateur boxing where she fights well at distance. But there's something psychologically. It's almost like Andrew Galata. Galata hit low. She has this need to have to hold. Wasn't super mad at the disqualification because several points had been taken. What I was mad about was I wish that the referee had have said, like I said in the Good Fight Post show last night, they had to walked her up to the edge. Like she had to walk the plank, and they're like, hey, if you hold again, the fight's off. I think that there needed to be one clear, if this happens again, the fight is over. And when she makes that decision, it's on. And I feel like the fight was ugly. It was frustrating. The result was possibly up in the air. And Caroline loses her belt via disqualification. She's had two really ugly fights this year, and it was really, really frustrating to watch. Atif Oberton also won on these Zeus prelims. He's a really good fighter. I recommend that you check him out. Now let's get into this week's action. So this week's action is Teofimo Lopez versus Rolly Romero. Quite honestly, this is a strange one, right? If it was a regular broadcast fight, I'd be fine with it if it was just on telecast. But this is a pay-per-view fight with Rolly Romero, who last fought May 2025. So it's a pretty long layoff. He beat Ryan Garcia. And Teofimo Lopez is coming off a one-sided fight to Shakur Stevenson, where Stevenson won basically every round, and he made it look like a sparring session because he just handled Teofimo that well. Storylines at play. PBC is now with DAZN, so Rolly is with PBC, and Teofimo Lopez has some form of a deal where the network has signed him directly, so he's going to work directly with DAZN. So there's like a major DAZN storyline here. Not a lot of build-up to this fight. There's been a little bit of Rolly going back to community-based events. I think he went back to his elementary school for a point to do some crowd engagement or civic-minded stuff. Teofimo did a workout at Fortune's Gym in Los Angeles. It wasn't what I was used to seeing from Teo. That being said, the Teo that I saw maybe doesn't exist anymore. 2017, 2018. He's one of the most exciting fighters I'd ever seen in the gym, and I thought he was destined for stardom. One could say he did reach stardom, but to me, it always feels a little. It's a little sad for me because the fighter I saw, and then I don't even know what he went through, but whatever he went through has shaped his career, and it's just been utter chaos. He doesn't seem like he's lived up to the heights that I was expecting from him, especially his enthusiasm in the gym. And I think deeper than that is he just doesn't seem as happy in the sport of boxing. There was a time where Teofimo Lopez really loved boxing, and I hope he gets back to loving boxing or just being really happy at some point, because it just seems like more of a job. And I guess for me, what was startling, maybe he's psychologically psyching people out, but the way his punches were going just didn't seem as fluid as they used to be. Rolly, obviously, you know what he's doing. He's mentally really strong. He's not at all soft, and he hits really hard. Somewhat of a storyline as they were friends. They were cordial around the time that I shot videos on both fighters. I'd seen them in the gym. Who knows what this fight looks like? You know, in theory, Lopez has more tools, but he's very inconsistent. You know, that's been what plagued him. You know, against Sandor Martin, that fight shouldn't have looked that way. Maybe it should have. Kambosos, you know, I can't even remember the Japanese fighter, I believe it was, that gave him a hard fight. It's just up and down. Some nights he's on, some nights he's off. The Arnold Barbosa fight I thought was incredible. Inconsistency has plagued Teofimo, and whereas Rolly is fairly the same. You know, I think that the big thing that a lot of people are pointing to is he's found religion, and that's kind of grounded him a bit, and that he's not as much like the troll internet personality he used to be. Rolly's a really sincere person, which I think shocks a lot of people, is how kind he is and how genuine he is. He just likes to mess around. This, to me, you know, talking with my subscribers, the live streamers, whoever lands the punch first. That's the type of fight this is. Who lands the punch first? I think the big story of this fight is going to be who takes a punch better, because whoever hits harder, whoever does more damage is going to be the one that is going to initiate the action. I think it's possible Teofimo can outbox Rolly. I think it's possible either guy could drop the other. I just don't know. And I hope that leading into this fight, as a fan of boxing, I get more excited, because it feels like a fight that I'm just not really sure why we're getting it. But I'll keep an open mind. Let's go to this undercard. Really strange undercard. I'm going to read through the undercard and we'll see what we got here. So on this undercard, we have, let's see, Yelneny Hernandez fighting Francisco Daniel Veron. Veron's been fighting at 154, I believe, moving up to middleweight. Hernandez is one of these guys that people are anointing as the best middleweight in the world. I've got serious reservations. Me and Dakota are not all in. He's either going to be like a generational Roberto Duran, or he's going to be a guy that's a one-speed fighter that people are in love with the fact that he just hits hard and he can put a lot of pressure. And when a next level guy gets in there, maybe he troubles him. And to me, there's a bully demeanor with Hernandez that I'm not sure, if things go against his way, if he can keep that will up. Veron shouldn't be that guy, but Veron's a really good boxer, and he's been through the Pro Box TV circuit. I've seen him fight in person, actually, and he's a really, really talented fighter. I wouldn't be shocked if this fight was a little trickier than it should be. Hernandez, if he is who people say he is, should use his physical size and just make this fight all about physicality and brute force. If he starts to struggle in this fight, this is like a foreshadowing of the monster in the woods kind of coming out later in the movie. WBA interim champion, junior featherweight Victor Santillan will face Gary Antonio Russell. I watched Santillan's last fight. It was on Shaw Boxing. It wasn't really that amazing. And Antonio Russell has just had a really hard pro career. I can't even tell you much about it, but it just doesn't feel like he's really reached the heights that people expected. So that's a kind of like a world-class 122-pound fight, but, you know, I'm not sure what we can expect there. Hopefully a good fight. And then probably the most interesting fight to me is Boxing Scene 2025 Prospect of the Year, Carlos Utera is facing my guy, Israel Badways Mercado. Utera had the toughest, in my opinion, there's people that push back on this because of the records of the pro experience. But I thought the path he took in the WBC Grand Prix was very hard. Won it. Really, there was like no enthusiasm around him winning it, which was just strange. And Israel Mercado, to me, reminds me a lot of Mauricio Herrera. Really tough, battle-tested guy who's willing to take the tough fights. So that's a fight that I really encourage people to watch. Other things to look for on this card: the PBC debut of Marco Romero. Shout out my guy Bob Trieger. Been doing a great job with him, and Ben Johnson and Jordan Roach of Team No Excuses, Lamont Roach Senior's gym. Then we go Friday. You know, Friday, this is in my notes, it says, you want to feel old? You know, it's the MVP card, and it's on TikTok. So if you want to feel old, this card will make you feel old real quick, because if you don't know how to use TikTok, you're probably not going to see this card. And I want to see this card. Main event is Amanda Serrano. She's taken on, I can't even say her name, Luciera Manzur. The point of this fight is for Serrano to potentially break Christy Martin's KO record. Mansour has been stopped twice before. One would suspect that Serrano and team probably have a good feeling that they can get the stoppage here and break that record. Serrano's really, really kind of cemented her already great legacy by joining MVP. So I think this could be one of the final times we see her fight. And it's like a Hall of Fame type moment for her. Also in action, light heavyweight, or not light heavyweight, kill me, lightweight Jamal Harvey, my guy, 2024 Olympian. Fight that stands out to me is Avius Griffin taking on Jackson Morenez. Morenez is best known for really giving Rolly a hard fight. Avius Griffin was cooking with gas until he ran into Julian Hammerhands Rodriguez. They got like a Dawson's Creek rivalry kind of thing going. Griffin versus Morenez. I think Morenez is a little older, so Griffin should handle him. Griffin really hits hard, but he's kind of like a learning on the job pro. So I think this is an interesting fight because Morenez can offer some questions about his like intellect and his ability to box and think through moments. One of my favorite sneaky undercard fights, Maylee Flores, just a really, really fun fighter. Her fight with Ellie Scotney absolutely ruled. Another really good fight on the card, Lupita Medina versus Brooke Sabirian. In fact, Mega Soto was in the chat, trainer of Brooke Sabirian and husband. He was commenting earlier. That's like a 50-50 fight. And they both came up on the 360 promotions circuit. I remember in 2024 and 2025, I was the beat writer for Boxing Scene for 360 promotions, which that'll be a story in and of itself one day because we don't see 360 promotions cards anymore. And it was right before Zuffa Boxing. And that fight was always talked about as a 360 promotions card. Speaking of 360 promotions, another alum, Right Hook Roxy, will also be in action on that card. And in the UK, we got George Ledard. He'll headline another card on DAZN. He faces Dario Morello. Ledard is a weird one because he does a lot of things good, but he doesn't quite seem like a world champion to me. And that's just a weird spot to be in, to be quite honest. So it's like he's in this no man's zone of kind of doing what's necessary, but it also feels like he's just taking lateral step after lateral step. We'll see. Maybe I'm being too hard. If Cowling sounds familiar, Cowling is the man that beat Aaron Bowen, a prospect. So he's going to take on Jimmy Sands in the co-feature. Jimmy Sands is just reckless aggression. He's a whole lot of fun. It's a middleweight fight. That could be a sneaky, really good fight. That just comes down to how good Sands' aggression is. And if Tom Cowling is really a guy, because Tom Cowling's really a guy, Jimmy Sands is the kind of guy you can beat. And then women's featherweight, Taya Mai Ayton will be returning. She was heavily thought of, and then she's had a hard fight or two. She needs to regain some momentum because I think last year people were really, really expecting her to go to that next level. Just things that I didn't touch on before I end this rather quick show is Teremoana Jr. Teremoana Jr. is got a fairly quick stoppage over DeAndre Savage. With all due respect, it was fairly predictable. But I think Teremoana Jr. is one of these fighters where, whether it's for whatever reason, he's just had trouble getting the compelling fights. It's probably just strictly logistics to develop his career, etc. He's getting to that point where in the next couple of years, maybe next half year or year, we're probably going to start wondering, what does a fight with him and Moses Atuma look like? It also speaks to the absolute, outside of my guy, the mozzarella fella in the chat, Mozzie. We don't have a lot of American heavyweights. The sport's just moving on. You look at the landscape, Agat Kabayel, I think, is the best heavyweight currently out. Usyk is a really good one. That big fight people want to see is Joshua and Fury. Those guys aren't U.S. fighters. Teremoana's Australian. Atuma's British. American fighters just aren't doing heavyweight boxing right now. It's not appealing. And I think seeing Teremoana, who just reminds me so much of George Foreman, kind of speaks to how bad the state of American boxing is, or especially heavyweight boxing. So Teremoana Jr. gets a knockout. I wouldn't be shocked if we see him return to action again before the end of the year. Who knows? Maybe even 2 times. He's just having cups of coffee in the ring. But that's it. That's what we have. Lionel Watson in the chat, one of my favorite folks, the second host today. Tuma has the same flaw that Wardley and AJ have. He's just more athletic and talented. Teremoana would be a problem for him. So here's my hot take, Lionel Watson. I think a Tuma, and this is risky and it's not my own money, I think you have to make all of his good fights in the next 2 years. Because I think if a Tuma loses any of his reflexes, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. I think he really impressed me with Jermaine Franklin. I think that mentally he's a great fighter. But I also think there's a belief, because like boxing, we love our history too much. And I think people really want to believe he's a new Mike Tyson, a Mike Tyson who's more grounded. And there's still a lot we got to learn, right? And I feel like as he gets older, a lot of the things he's doing currently don't work as much. So I'm excited for a Tuma, but like the fight I'd like to see is a Tuma versus Caballel. Because to me, that's a 50-50 fight. But that is me. That is the podcast this week. Maybe we'll get Dakota back on. And that's the show. Take care, guys.